The first time Marcus noticed the door open, he didn't immediately register it as wrong. There was that brief moment, a split second of cognitive dissonance, where his brain tried to reconcile what he was seeing with what he knew to be true. He stood at the end of his driveway, breath still coming in measured pants from his morning run, sweat cooling on his forehead in the Northern California fog. The heavy oak front door of his rental house was open exactly 6 inches. Not thrown, wide, not barely ajar. 6 precise inches, enough to see the shadow of his entryway inside. Enough to make him absolutely certain he was losing his mind. Because Marcus Hale never ever left that door unlocked, let alone open. He approached with the cautious steps of someone expecting to find an intruder, though something deeper told. Him he wouldn't. The silence around him felt thick, unnatural, as if the entire cul-de-sac had been wrapped in acoustic foam. No birds, no distant traffic, just the sound of his running shoes on concrete and the maddening certainty that he had locked that door last night. Triple-checked it, as he did every night since moving in 3 months ago. The brass deadbolt had turned with that satisfying, solid click. He had pulled the handle twice to confirm. It was his ritual, his certainty in a life that had recently lost most of its anchors. But now the door hung open as if waiting. For what, Marcus couldn't say. Inside, nothing was disturbed. His laptop still sat on the kitchen counter, where he'd left it after sending his final work email at 11:47 p.m. The coffee mug he'd rinsed was still upside down on the dish rack. He walked through each room methodically, checking windows, looking for signs of forced entry or anything missing. The house felt exactly as he'd left it, except for that impossible open door. He took out his phone and pulled up the security app he'd installed when he first moved in. A simple system that logged door and window sensors. According to the log, the front door had been opened at 3:12 a.m. There was no record of any other activity before his run at 6 a.m. I must have sleepwalked, Marcus muttered to himself, though he'd never sleepwalked in his life. Not even during the worst months of his divorce, when stress had him operating on 3 hours of broken sleep. He made his coffee, black, no sugar, and sat at his kitchen island, staring at his phone's security log, as if willing it to reveal some other explanation. The timestamp stared back, unyielding. 3:12 a.m. That evening, Marcus called the rental agency to ask about previous tenants, about any issues with the house's security. The woman who answered sounded distracted, her voice slightly too loud in his ear. "I don't have any records of complaints about security," she said after a long pause. "The house has been a reliable rental for us. People tend to stay long-term." "What about the last tenant? Can you tell me anything about them?" Another pause. "I'll have to check our files. The record shows the house was vacant for 8 months before you moved in. Previous to that..." Her voice trailed off. "I'll need to look into it and call you back." She never did. By the third morning of finding his meticulously locked door standing open, Marcus's rational explanations had exhausted themselves. He wasn't sleepwalking. He'd filmed himself sleeping using his phone propped on his dresser. The camera showed him lying still all night, save for the occasional shift or turn. The security log continued to show the door opening at exactly 3:12 a.m. each night, despite the deadbolt being engaged. On the 4th night, he went further. He filmed himself locking the door, narrating his actions aloud like a man documenting evidence. "Front door, deadbolt engaged," he said, turning the lock and then pulling on the handle twice. "Door is secure. Time is 11:32 p.m. He watched the video in the morning, standing in his kitchen while the coffee maker gurgled. On screen, his hand turned the lock with decisive precision. His voice sounded strange to his ears, slightly more clipped than he remembered being. When he looked up from his phone, the front door stood open exactly 6 inches. A week in, Marcus became methodical. He placed a hair across the top of the door frame, a trick he'd read about in a spy novel years ago. In the morning, the hair was undisturbed. He laid a thin strip of paper at the base of the door, folded precisely in half. In the morning, the fold remained intact, though the door stood open. He placed a piece of clear tape across the gap between door and frame. In the morning, the tape was unbroken, but had somehow been shifted to accommodate the open door. His work began to suffer. Bridge inspection reports contained errors he would never make, miscalculations in load assessments, overlooked corrosion, patterns. Twice his supervisor emailed about inconsistencies in methodology that Marcus had no memory of implementing. When he opened the documents, he found comments and notes in what appeared to be his own handwriting, but using phrases he never used. The Eastern support exhibits microfractures consistent with torsional stress beyond tolerance thresholds, one comment read. Marcus stared at it for a long time. He would never use the phrase beyond tolerance thresholds. It sounded clinical, detached, not his voice at all. He started noticing other small discrepancies in his daily life. The barista at his regular coffee shop greeted him one morning with unusual familiarity. The usual Marcus? Been coming in pretty late these days. Marcus, working hard or hardly working? She laughed, a sound slightly too loud for the quiet cafe. He blinked at her. I'm sorry. Have we met before? I mean, I know I come here, but... Her smile faltered. You were just in here yesterday afternoon, around 4:30. We talked about the coastal erosion affecting the cliffside properties. Marcus had been home all day yesterday, on a video call with his project team from 3 p.m. until nearly 6 p.m. He hadn't left the house at all. Must have been someone else, he said, forcing a smile. Maybe, she said, but her expression suggested she didn't believe it. But they used your credit card, same name on the receipt. That night he called his ex-wife Elizabeth. They'd managed to maintain a cordial relationship. The divorce had been amicable, a mutual recognition that they'd grown into different people who no longer fit together rather than any dramatic betrayal. She answered on the 4th ring, a voice tentative. Marcus, is everything okay? It's almost midnight here. He hadn't checked the time difference. East Coast, 3 hours ahead. Sorry, I wanted to hear a familiar voice. The new place is still feeling a bit strange. There was a pause. You sound different. Different how? I don't know. Like you're watching me while you talk. There's something detached in your voice. I'm just tired, he said quickly. Not sleeping well. The Marcus I know doesn't call it midnight because he's not sleeping well. What's really going on? He wanted to tell her about the door, about the strange comments appearing in his work, about the barista who claimed to have seen him when he wasn't there. But something stopped him, a feeling that speaking these things aloud would somehow make them more real, more dangerous. Just adjusting still, I guess. The divorce, the move, the new job responsibilities. It's a lot. Marcus, her voice softened. We've been divorced for over a year. You moved 3 months ago, and you've had those new responsibilities for almost 6 months now. Had it been that long, he could have sworn the divorce was finalized just before he moved, that the promotion had come after as a fresh start. Right, he said. Of course. Like I said, just tired. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the dark living room for a long time, staring at the front door. At some point, he must have fallen asleep on the couch because he woke with a start at 5:30 a.m. The door was open, 6 inches. He hadn't even bothered to lock it the night before. His dreams became doors. An endless sequence of them, wooden, metal, glass, all locked, all opening slowly while he watched, helpless to stop them. Sometimes he dreamed he was standing behind himself, watching himself sleep. In those dreams, his sleeping self would sometimes open his eyes and stare directly at the watching self, and Marcus would wake with a scream caught in his throat. 2 weeks after the door first opened, Marcus installed a small indoor security camera facing the front door. He disabled the Wi-Fi connection, ensuring the footage would be stored locally without any possibility of remote tampering. The camera recorded in infrared, capable of capturing movement in complete darkness. He set it up carefully, testing the angle multiple times until he was satisfied it had an unobstructed view of the entire door. That night, he performed his locking ritual with even more care than usual, narrating each step aloud for the camera. Front door deadbolt engaged at 11:17 p.m., he said clearly. Door is secure. He pulled the handle twice, demonstrating that it wouldn't open. Camera is recording. Good night. He slept fitfully, waking several times from dreams where he stood in his own hallway, watching himself. By morning, exhaustion had settled into his bones like concrete. He didn't need to check to know the door would be open, but he went through the motions anyway, padding down the hallway in bare feet. 6 inches. Always 6 inches. The camera's memory card contained footage that ended abruptly at 3:12 a.m. One moment the door was closed, secure, the deadbolt clearly engaged. The next moment, nothing. Black screen. The recording had simply stopped. Not with static or distortion, just a clean cut to black. Marcus set up a second camera the next night. This one he placed further back in the hallway, positioned to capture both the door and the first camera. Again, he locked the door carefully, narrated his actions, and went to bed. In the morning, the door stood open. The second camera's footage showed something Marcus replayed 17 times, his heart pounding harder with each viewing. At 3:11 a.m., the first camera, the one pointed directly at the door, turned. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a slow, deliberate motion that rotated it just enough to no longer have the door in frame. No one touched it. It simply moved, as if adjusted by invisible hands. And there was something else. Something he almost missed until the 14th viewing. In the reflection of the hallway mirror, visible for less than a second, a shadow. Not a person, not anything he could define, but a silhouette that didn't match the layout of the room. A shape that shouldn't have been there, that couldn't have cast that particular shadow from any object in his house. Marcus began to avoid going home. He worked late at coffee shops, took long drives along the coastal highway, even spent one night in his car parked at a scenic overlook. But eventually he always returned, and regardless of whether he locked the door or not, by morning it would be in a state opposite to how he left it. If locked, it would be open. If left open, he would wake to find it securely locked. The day he found the photograph was the day something in him broke. He'd been searching through the locked drawer where he kept his important documents, passport, birth certificate, the final divorce papers, looking for his social security card. Tucked between 2 folders was a photograph he had never seen before. The paper felt old, slightly brittle at the edges. The image showed his house, unmistakably his current rental house, but from decades ago, judging by the older car parked in the driveway and the less developed surroundings. In the photograph, a figure stood at the front door. The door was open, exactly 6 inches, and the figure stood half in shadow. Though the face was blurred, either by motion or by the limitations of the camera that had captured the image, the posture was distinctly familiar. Shoulders slightly hunched, left foot forward. Marcus recognized his own stance, the way he habitually stood when thinking or waiting. He turned the photograph over. Written in faded ink was a date 5 years, before Marcus was born. That afternoon, he drove to the rental agency's office. The address he had in his phone took him to an empty lot overgrown with weeds. A construction sign announced future development plans, but the weathered condition of the sign suggested those plans had been abandoned long ago. He called the agency's number and received an automated message that the number was no longer in service. Back at the house, Marcus sat on his porch steps as evening fell, watching as lights came on in distant homes. The silence of the cul-de-sac seemed deeper than ever. Had his neighbors always been this quiet? Had he ever actually spoken to any of them? He tried to recall the conversations he must have had, casual greetings, introductions when he first moved in, but found only vague impressions, nothing concrete. When had the rental agent given him the keys? He remembered moving in, remembered unpacking his modest collection of furniture and belongings, but the actual handover of keys existed in his memory as a blank space. Just as he couldn't clearly remember viewing the house before signing the lease, these memories felt like photographs slightly out of focus, present but indistinct. That night, Marcus didn't lock the door, not because he had forgotten, but because the act itself had begun to feel performative, as if he were being watched each time he went through the motions, as if somewhere, someone or something was mirroring his actions, turning an identical key in an identical lock. He slept dreamlessly for the first time in weeks. In the morning, the door was firmly locked. The next night, he locked it. In the morning, it stood open. Gradually, Marcus stopped checking altogether. He would lock or unlock the door at random, no longer attempting to predict or control what state it would be in when he woke. Sometimes weeks would pass where he barely noticed, where the door's status became just another ambient condition of his existence, like the weather or the quality of light at different times of day. He kept the photograph, though he never showed it to anyone. Occasionally, he would take it out and study it, looking for clues or inconsistencies. The figure at the door never became clearer, no matter how long he stared. His work improved. The strange comments stopped appearing in his documents. The barista never again mentioned seeing him when he hadn't been there. Life assumed a new normal, one where Marcus accepted that some small corner of reality didn't obey the rules he had always taken for granted. 6 months after the door first opened, Marcus received a letter. It had no return address, just his name and address printed in a font that looked like standardized handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 sentences. Check the basement storage unit, box labeled previous tenant. Marcus had never been to the basement, had never even known there was one, despite living in the house for over 9 months now. But that evening he found a door off the kitchen pantry, previously hidden behind a shelving unit he realized was not actually attached to the wall. A narrow staircase led down to a small, dimly lit space with concrete walls. Against the far wall sat a single cardboard box, labeled exactly as the letter had described. Inside the box was a journal. The handwriting inside matched the comments he had once found appearing in his work documents. Clinical, precise, using phrases like beyond tolerance thresholds. The journal detailed the experiences of the previous tenant, who had also found the front door opening at precisely 3:12 a.m., despite being locked the night before. The final entry was dated the day before Marcus had signed his lease. I understand now. It isn't the house that's wrong. It's not even the door. It's the threshold. The space between closed and open, between locked and unlocked. I've been living in that threshold for months now, perhaps years. Tomorrow I'm going to step all the way through. If anyone finds this, know that the door will always be open for you too. Whether you lock it or not doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're ready to acknowledge what's been waiting on the other side all along. Marcus closed the journal. He climbed the stairs slowly, his mind surprisingly calm. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water and looked out the window at the darkening sky. Tomorrow morning he would find the door either locked or open, and for the first time he thought he might be ready to understand what that really meant. If this story kept you here until the end, like the video and subscribe. The next one might be waiting for you right now, and there's one more waiting just over there. Maybe it explains what was missing from this one. Maybe it makes everything worse. You listened, but not everything was told.